Hello and welcome to Board Now's Cult Film Reviews, and on this video I will be having a very special review of the cult classic horror movie The Wicker Man, the original of course from 1973. And the reason I'm reviewing this is because I've literally just been to see it. I've come back in not barely an hour ago, let's say. Yeah, about an hour ago. I went to a special open air screening of The Wicker Man tonight at Williamson Park, which is in Lancaster, local to me. They've got a whole season of open air screenings, so if you happen to see this video and live in or around Lancaster, then you could do worse than go along to one of the screenings. They're on till the 24th of August. There's my promotion for the Dukes and their special open air screening films. But some great stuff coming up. Jurassic Park, which I'm going to on the 10th of August. Sorry to bother you. More mainstream stuff like Dirty Dancing, Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, Bohemian Rhapsody. There's Us, the recent Jordan Peele horror, and many classic cult films as well, and The Princess Bride, another classic coming of age. So yes, some really great films in Williamson Park this summer. But yeah, tonight I went to see The Wicker Man. And I've seen it before. I've seen it a few times now, not for a while, and this is the first time I've seen it at the cinema or projected, let's say, and it really was the perfect location for it. I mean, first of all, I had to walk some way to the very end of the park to find it, so that in itself was like a little searchlight mission, and it was really an intimate setting. And very rainy tonight, which really added to the atmosphere. I think it really focuses you as well. But yeah, just finding your way back, through the darkness and the murky setting. But yeah, really perfect intimate setting for such a film as The Wicker Man. So the film's directed by Robert Howe, who I'm not sure, not a name I recognise. I guess since it's a cult film that makes sense, but yeah, because it's such a talked about film, you maybe think it would be directed by someone you might have heard of. But yeah, anyone watching this video, if you know if Robert Howe did other significant films, then that would be very interesting to hear. It of course stars the late Edward Woodward, Christopher Lee at his very best, and Britt Ekland, amongst other, a lot of familiar faces in the cast. Britt Ekland, famously, you see a lot of her in this film, and famously I believe she has a dubbed accent because the film is set on like a Scotland island, and spookily she seems to be speaking a perfect Scottish accent. She is of course Swedish originally, so I think you can see when you watch her mouth, then yeah, that does look dubbed, and it would explain the fact that the accent seems so perfect. I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere that they did dub it in. But I have to say, she's pretty impressive in this film, Britt Ekland. You don't think of her as being the best actress, but yeah, she plays her role very well. So in case you don't know what is The Wicker Man? Well, Edward Woodward plays a police officer who goes to a remote Scottish island to investigate the disappearance of a young girl, and so he shows up on the island and he starts questioning the locals about the girl. Have they seen her? What can they tell him about her, and they're all very sort of vague. I mean, at first there seems to be a denial about any knowledge of her at all, and slowly some information about her does come out, and it appears as though she has been on the island, but it's all very vague, and there's all kind of even the girl's mother, who has another daughter. I mean, she seems very blasé about the fact that the daughter's gone missing and could potentially be dead. And I mean, on this island, that they engage in really these spiritual sort of practices that are almost alternative to Christianity, sort of thing. So they have their own set of values and beliefs, and a big part of the film is their own sort of spiritual ceremonies and their extreme kind of paganism. And I think the dynamic of that is really some of the powerful stuff in the film, because we sort of later find out that the Edward Woodward character is a strong belief in Christianity. So as things go on, we get those two sides and those two different belief systems rubbing up against each other. And I think if you think of something like The Exorcist, that's such a classic horror, partly because of the religious aspect and the sense of good versus evil sort of thing. And so I mean, I will get into some spoilers about the film, so just to warn you. But I mean, I think what's fascinating partly about the Wicker Man is just how balanced it is in a way. I mean, it's easy obviously to see it as Edward Woodward, his character, very much on the good side of things, the voice of sanity, obviously trying to find the girl, trying to do good, and up against these peculiar characters who seem they seem to believe in reincarnation, and they seem there's certainly a suggestion that they could have done something to the girl. But yeah, it never paints it quite that black and white sort of thing. I think, especially as we move on into the film, the Woodward character is more and more very self-righteous, very sort of narrow-minded in some ways, and also I think, without getting into the ending just yet, I think there is this element of free will, and I think it even suggests at one point, and again, obviously you can't justify what happens to him in the long term, but I think, there is this element of essentially they're not hurting their own, or at least there's no evidence of their hurting their own. And yes, they have these strange, unconventional practices, but there's actually no, apart from obviously the final scene, which I'll get to, there's no real evidence of them actually doing any damage to it. It's just they're very strange, basically. But I think on the other hand, it's also quite balanced about their spirituality, because essentially they are very, the idea is that they're, to use a slang term, tree huggers. They're very much of the earth. They're very against traditional sort of practices. They're very sort of hippie. I mean, you get these strange sessions in school where they are actually talking about nudity and the body to children who are obviously too young to process that information, but they do these strange sort of rituals, and they are nude during them, sort of thing. So you can tie them to, obviously, hippie culture and, earth culture, very in tune with the earth and the surroundings. And so again, that's interesting because on the one hand, it's maybe a critique of just how extreme that culture can be and how there can be something quite pretentious about it, but also extreme. The fact that these people may, if you think about it in real life, I mean, the fact that these people, their message may well be an honourable one, but they're sort of going about it in the wrong way on occasions. But at the same time, you can look at that sort of either way. Again, there's this sense that maybe they're not doing anyone any harm. So there's certainly a balance there, which I find intriguing. And in a way, it doesn't really tip over until the final scene of the film. But yeah, I'll talk a bit about the film and a bit about what makes it such a unique sort of cult film. Obviously, you can tell it's very low budget. The island is very distinct character in the film, and there's just something very raw, organic about it. Just a very distinct film, and the way scenes play out so naturally and build from the ground up. And the thing about it is, until you kind of get to the final half, there's very few kind of what you would say. I mean, there's none real sort of jump scares that you would say that you see in most horror films. But yeah, it's just this sense of unease. It's this trippy sense, this sense that something isn't quite right. And I think what makes the film more scary is that sense of unease and that sense of things slowly going wrong. And what I'll say as well is, I think, having seen it a few times now, I think knowing the ending and knowing the fate of the main character actually makes the ending all the more impactful, all the more powerful, because there is the sense of this is going to happen to him, this is unavoidable. I think when it's that sort of ending and the way it all plays out, I think that knowing it's coming actually makes it more sort of frightening, more sort of impactful. So, and there's a nice sort of twist in the end as well, which I'll get to. But yeah, there's just this really odd sort of hypnotic sort of atmosphere, these strange, as I said, rituals and ceremonies. You get these songs that the locals are singing in pubs, and there's always like a brass sort of band playing, and these just strange lyrics, and obviously characters, talking out of turn to the Woodward cop, and all being very cryptic. I mean, there's an early song when they're singing about the barmaid, which is the Britt Ekland sort of character. Obviously we get introduced to Christopher Lee, and he's like the sort of mayor of the town, and it is classic Christopher Lee. It is one of the roles he's best known for, and again, just his delivery and his just his mannerisms, they're just so spot on. He's just so into the character, and just, I think he has this classic sort of stately sort of tone to him, this sort of malevolent sort of evil, but he does it in a way where it's very difficult to sort of to sort of judge him either way. It's very hard. He doesn't really play. I mean, I think because this is a horror film, and because of the way things are unfolding on the island, I think you sense that, yeah, there is something sinister about him. But yeah, the way he plays it is so straight down the middle, and because I mean, at first he doesn't seem to be putting any resistance up. He says you can, because the police officer asks if he can, sort of exhume the girl's corpse, from her coffin, to examine the body, because he does find her gravestone at one point. And Christopher Lee, his character, sort of says yes, and sort of goes along with it. And there's this funny line, because they're doing this ritual out on the grass, where they're sort of, I think they're jumping over fire or something crazy like that, and they're all naked, and he sort of says, well, you wouldn't want them to. They can't be expected to jump over fire with their clothes on, surely. It's a funny line. But yeah, so he says, go ahead, you can take the body from the coffin. And lo and behold, when the Woodward character gets there, that there's no body there at all. It's actually a rabbit, and a dead rabbit. So he comes back, he throws the rabbit on the floor when the Lee character is in sort of in his home with his wife, who's like the local teacher. And basically, again, I mean, they're portraying this as reincarnation sort of thing, it's, and again, this is open for interpretation, whether they actually believe this or if it's just, or a bit of a game, which obviously the police officer thinks it is. But the wife sort of suggests, she'd been reincarnating as a rabbit, she would love that because she loved rabbits, sort of thing. And obviously the police officer isn't buying into that. And then we have these real strange rhythmic sort of movements and scenes, like with the Britt Ekland. So one of the most famous scene, probably the most famous apart from the end scene, is when the police officer, I forget his name actually, but when he's in his hotel room sleeping or trying to get to sleep, she's like the landlady, the barmaid. So she lives there because she works there with her, I assume. I mean, she might not be related to him actually, but anyway. She probably is because she seems to be living there. But anyway, the fact is she's doing this hypnotic dance and is basically naked in the room next door. And it's this slow building sort of dance where she slaps like a tambourine and, starts moving her body and kind of, gently knocks on the door, or not on the door but on the wall. She's sort of tapping on it, and so again it's all in rhythm with this sort of this music and this sound, and yeah, it becomes a really intimate scene because obviously the Woodward character is kind of sort of taken aback by it, but he's slowly drawn into it and gets sort of aroused in a way at one point. He's definitely sort of seduced by it, and he sort of knocks back. So I sort of like this intimacy they're having through the wall sort of thing. But yeah, just a scene like that just shows you, I think, the genius of the film, because it's not just this pervy scene of, Britt Ekland kind of, dancing naked. It's this really strange hypnotic scene where there's a rhythm to it, and where they actually make, an attractive girl dancing naked into something sort of sinister and kind of creepy, and they have this intimate thing through the wall actually. But yeah, it's a great scene. And we kind of build to the big finale, which is kind of the scene everyone will know. And so the twist I was speaking of is that basically because they have this, and I like the way they set this all up, it's really well thought out, is obviously when they've had the blow up when he, chucks the rabbit down, the lead character sort of says, oh, it's just as well you won't be staying for our May Day celebrations the next day. And it's sort of crucial because later on, when what goes down, the lead character sort of says, well, you came here by your own free will, you're here by your own free will. So there's almost this suggestion, there's something in the line where it's almost saying, you're free to leave if you want, although actually he later finds out that his boat mysteriously isn't working because he's come by boat. But anyway, there's this suggestion, because he's due to leave anyway, so there's this idea that he can leave. So yeah, there's something in that line which is almost like a warning. It's like, well, if you are around for the May Day celebrations, be it on your head sort of thing. But when he can't get back because his boat seems to not be working, the cop or police officer decides, he decides to go undercover almost, because they're all dressed up in these outfits and they're dancing through the town, and so he dresses up in one of the costumes to try and get close, to try and I think he figures that there's something significant about the celebration because of the fact that the lead character highlighted it. So what eventually happens, there's this neat little scene where they're doing this strange game where they all have to go through like, it's like a hoop, but there's kind of it's either a spike or there's sharp blades on it, so you could potentially, cut off your head essentially. And it's almost like this game where they all go through it and the thing's sort of moving, so kind of the idea is that someone eventually might get caught in it, and someone does, but it turns out to be this young child or this girl, and I think she's basically fine because she's too small anyway, and she's just in this hood, and it turns out to be a bit of a trick. But what ends up happening is then the young girl who he's been searching for this whole time, the police officer, turns out is alive, and she appears on the top of the mountain, and it appears as though she's in danger. It looks as though they're going to sacrifice her. So the police officer, kind of runs up to save her, and he's obviously revealed he's been under the costume, which was again smartly done, because I'm pretty sure they hadn't shown us previously that he'd gone into the costume, so that was a nice reveal. So he runs up and saves her, and they sort of they run away from from the group who are like chasing them. And they go down the tunnel and they go up onto a mountain. But then it's revealed that was all a trick sort of thing. So the lead character and a few others appear at the top of the mountain. And it turns out that the girl was she was asked to set him up. And so it's almost this really clever sort of plan all along, where the girl was never sort of missing. So I like that. That was a nice little twist in the tale. And that's when the lead character does the speech about the whole free will. He was here on his own free will. And there's this thing about the crops, taking a downturn for the first time in years, and that's somehow connected to this, and the fact that they need a sacrifice and all this, and he becomes the sacrifice in the end. The famous scene with him actually hoisted up to the Wicker Man and then burning him alive, and as they're doing their chanting, he's kind of doing his, there's a chant from him which is representing his own spiritual beliefs. So again, it's a really great horror sort of thing, these two belief systems going up against each other, these forces of evil, and they're sort of saying, well, we're going to give you the special gift and that'll be everlasting life. So again, reincarnation, and there's this message from Woodward which is kind of saying, well, next year these people sacrifice you sort of thing, they will turn on you. But it's a really memorable ending, a really visual ending, and one of the great horror twists of all times. And just the fact that they went through with it, because in a lot of these films, certainly in a more mainstream sort of film, you would expect the cop to end up winning the day, saving the girl, or certainly surviving, if you like. And the fact they actually go through with his sacrifice really is something, and it's so memorable. Edward Woodward just screaming, oh my god, when he's being burnt. So I hope I've given you a good idea of why The Wicker Man is such a distinct and classic film. I think it pretty much is a masterpiece. So if I would rate it, I think I would give it a 9 out of 10. It's always hard to go like the full 10, whether I would quite say it's a masterpiece. But it's certainly as close to a masterpiece as you'll get without, going the full 10. I don't know, maybe if I see it more, I'll go up to that. I mean, I would give it 5 stars, certainly, if I was doing the star system. But out of 10, I'll go 9 out of 10. Very, very strong, very unusual and distinct film. Really good performances. And again, it just shows the low budget horror and just a distinct sort of setting and scenes building organically really is some of the most effective stuff you can do with horror. But I thought I'd do a special review of The Wicker Man just because I went to see it tonight, and I'll do this a lot more when I come home from the cinema, whether it's a new film or an older film. Then I'll probably pull up a review. But that has been my review of The Wicker Man from 1973. I'll probably do this remake at some point, which I've never seen, but I hear is hilarious. But thanks for watching, and I'll have more movie reviews soon. Good night.